Frank's Red Hot is the perfect blend of flavor and heat, so you can use an entire bottle to make recipes like buffalo chicken dip or buffalo nachos, or even things that don't start with buffalo. Frank's Red Hot, I put that on everything.
Hey, Craig, it's almost Cougar football Saturday.
Oh, yeah. And I don't have a song for you today, but I will say this is a very special podcast versus everyone, the first of which we've done as a game preview. This will be a shorter episode. We'll be only previewing the opponent, New Mexico State, for this Saturday's game in Martin Stadium at 7 p.m. on Pac-12 Networks.
Yeah.
I am Craig Powers. With me, as always, is Jeff Nusser. Jeff, are you stoked for this?
I'm excited. I'm a little less excited than I was because now I'm not going to the game anymore. But The
fates of Pullman Lodging.
The fates of Pullman Lodging have conspired against me. That's okay. I'm still fired up. I'm going to watch the game. I'm going to sit in the relative comfort of my living room and
Hell yeah, I'm stoked. I'll be out in Pullman. Get my dad with me, and we'll be nice and sauced by 7 p.m.
Yeah.
I know that.
You and like 20,000 of your best friends.
Yeah, exactly. I saw about over 4,000 tickets available on StubHub. So
that was the thing.
Like
I
was trying to dump those things out.
I was waiting, and I was like, "Oh, I can sit there for $20. I can sit there for $20 bucks.
Right.
I can sit there for $20." Like,
yeah, right. Yeah.
So hey, if you have the means to go, by the way, and you're listening to this, and you're like, dude, you can get a good seat for cheap.
Yeah, especially if you're in like I don't know. I
driving
guess it's
distance
hard to
for sure.
Driving distance, go for it. It'll
Spokane.
be as cheap as it gets. It'll be a late drive back, but
I think anything outside Spokane, is, I don't know. There are probably crazy people that drive back to the Tri-Cities after a 7:00 game, but
so and on that topic, this we'll dig right into New Mexico State's offense because I fully expect this to be nearing 4-hour football game.
Yeah.
The Aggies were the 19th fastest pace by adjusted tempo based on Bill Connolly's stats last year.
Yeah.
And they also run a kind of version of the air raid where they throw the ball roughly 45 times a game. So you can expect an pretty long game on Saturday. So
yeah, two things that make long games: lots of scoring and lots of passing. And so you're going to have probably both, even though New Mexico State probably won't do a lot of scoring. I imagine we will. And they're going to be, between the two teams, probably about 100 to 120 passes in the air. So
yeah. So dig in, get yourself comfortable in Martin or on your couch, and expect a long night.
Yeah.
But yeah, beyond that, so if you guys want to kind of, if you like reading as well, I have a preview up, and then on Coug Center we'll also have previews from Brian Anderson, and then also a coach's corner from Jesse. I saw him working on that. And awesome. And then you can also listen to Michael Preston's podcast where he, the Coug Center Hour, where he talked with New Mexico State's play-by-play guy about the team. So probably not many people that know the team better than he does. So, but I will try in my research that I've done for my post, and Jeff as well. We'll try to give you a good preview here. It starts with the quarterback, of course. They have Josh Atkins is their redshirt sophomore quarterback. He started the last 8 games last season to kind of mixed results. His overall stat line looked pretty good. He threw for something like 2,300 yards, 13 touchdowns, 9 picks, 6.5 yards per attempt. But when you look overall, that's like a pretty solid freshman season. Especially at a pretty bad school. I should note that Jeff, we talked about this, that the Aggies are an FBS independent.
Yeah.
So they have a pretty crazy schedule.
Yeah. Well, it's like, so basically they got kicked out of their conference, which is kind of like Idaho did with. So they were in the same conference with Idaho in the Sun Belt, or the Fun Belt, as as many of us like to call it. But yeah, kind of a weird deal. They got kicked out and they decided, yeah, we'll just play independent. And I'm curious to see how that goes for them, because that seems like it's one thing if BYU, which sort of has a quasi-national following just because of the religious affiliation, and then you got Army and whatever. But I don't know how that really works out for a school like New Mexico State. Didn't really work out so great for Idaho, so at least for the short time that they were an independent.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting. That their schedule is pretty weird. They actually go to Bama right after us. So
yeah, good luck, boys.
Yeah, so I don't know if they'd be looking ahead or just dreading ahead. But and then
no way, dude. They totally want Bama.
And they actually play Liberty, who is also an independent, twice.
Yeah,
which is crazy. But
Liberty's just jumped up to FBS though, so that's
that's
the thing there.
2017, I think, or last year was their first season. Their first season, and so I think they have a kind of home and home thing going with them. So that's going to be how they fill out the schedule. But so these are the challenges that they face. So given that, Atkins looks like a pretty decent quarterback from kind of the video I watched. But really, he kind of did most of his work against in two games, again, a home game against Liberty and a home game against Alcorn State, where he hit 69% of his passes, 798 yards, 8 touchdowns, no picks in those two games. The rest of the games, not so good, 52% completion rate. And really, what that says to me, you also look, they were 120th in success rate last year, and what that is basically keeping up with the chains, staying on schedule, basically 5 yards on first down, getting below getting to at least a 3rd and 3 on second down, and then converting on 3rd down and 4th down. So they were terrible at staying behind the chains. When you see the guy went throwing 45 times a game and is only completing just over half his passes, that will certainly get you behind the chains.
Yes. That's bad.
Yeah.
Because you're getting, at least if you run with any kind of frequency, you at least stand a chance of kind of maybe, getting up there and having, 2nd and 6 or something like that,
right.
But when it's obviously the binary, of positive yards versus 0 yards, and you throw in 0 yards half the time, you're going to make things very, 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 very difficult for yourself.
Exactly. And
it's kind of like 2012, 2012 under Leach. We kind of went through some of that.
Yep. And that was not a good offensive year. And
nope.
Yeah. But on the ground game, they do run a lot more than WSU does, obviously. Because WSU is closer to about 60 passes a game compared to 45, but they do run quite a bit more, and obviously I said they have the faster pace, so they get quite a few more plays in when their offense is working. So they do have some. I think probably their best playmaker is at running back, and that's in Tyler Huntley. He's Jason Huntley. Wrong Huntley.
That's all right. We'll talk about Tyler Huntley later.
Yeah, in a few weeks. But Jason Huntley, he's got some. He's a bit of a burner. I think he's certainly a kind of a home run threat, and he catches the ball out of the backfield really well. I think he actually would fit in Pullman quite well. And then they have another running back who's more of just a straight up runner, and they'll split carries. Is Christian Gibson. I think. If someone's going to make plays, I would definitely look at those two, Gibson and Huntley, making plays. If someone steps up and burns us, especially Huntley, maybe matched up against maybe getting one of our young safeties in the slot, or something, or maybe Skylar Thomas adjusting to the nickel corner position, or something like that. Because actually Huntley averaged 11 yards a catch last year, which is crazy for a running back.
Yeah.
You look at our guys; they're averaging seven yards a catch. So
yeah.
That's pretty good. Outside of that, they have it's their offense wasn't very good last year. So it's how much do you get into it? One thing that really, really hurts them is they have had a ton of injuries on the offensive line in the spring ball and fall camp. They have a pretty damn good left tackle in Sage Duxtater. I'm probably saying that name wrong, but he's going to be out He's got a shoulder injury. Hat tip to Jason Groves of Las Cruces Sun News, by the way, for all this reporting. Otherwise, I'd have no idea what's going on. But yeah, they basically lost another starter in spring ball to a spinal condition. They lost another starter to a stress fracture. They have another backup tackle that had a season-ending injury during fall camp. So basically what you got is you got one experienced guy, one sort of experienced guy, and then you have like a whole lot of guys who have never started before, two redshirt freshmen who never played before, another junior who's never played before either. So he's a converted defensive end. So quite a that's the real opportunity, man. If you could talk a bit about really the strength of WSU's defense is the front seven, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's, getting after the quarterback has been their strength for, 2 years, really. Maybe even 3. You could probably go back even farther than that. And, it's never a good time when you're replacing a bunch of guys. You've got a bunch of young guys. The offensive line is obviously the unit that requires the greatest amount of communication, requires guys to be on the same page, particularly with a defensive front that does the kinds of things that we do, which is we're penetrating, we're slanting, we're doing the stemming. That's going to be pointed out probably 38 times on the broadcast about how we stem on the defensive line. Like, oh my God, it's so revolutionary now that we've been doing it for 3 years. But, those are the kinds of things that, can definitely give, for as much as I'm making fun of it right now, those are definitely the kinds of things that can give an inexperienced and, very green as far as working together offensive line difficulties. So, definitely will be interesting to see if they can even do the stuff that they want to do. Because Huntley, Huntley looks like a pretty explosive dude. Like you were mentioning the catches, he caught almost 50 balls. And so he had that average, not on just like 10 or 15 catches. Like that was on 47 receptions to average that. And he's also apparently a pretty explosive kickoff returner. He has the potential to match or set a kickoff return touchdown record this year. So career. So he's definitely a guy to keep an eye on, but it's kind of like, can they even get started? Right. And that's, I think, going to be, again, as we were kind of hearkening back to 2012 WSU and how painful it can be to run an offense where A, you can't complete a lot of passes, and B, the quarterback doesn't really have time to do much of anything. That's usually a bad combination for an offense that wants to throw the ball a fair amount.
Right. Exactly. So basically, when it boils down to it, you're gonna see probably some quick 3 and outs fairly often because they play quickly. I'm sure they'll slow it down a little bit because they're playing a team that they're very overmatched against. But you'll see a lot of quick 3 and outs. But I do think they'll find their way to the end zone a few times, like once or twice, just because of the amount of possessions you'll see in this game. And they'll probably get some possessions against our backups as well. It'll be interesting to see. Definitely that watch that offensive line, watch against our front seven. That they could have a nice stat building day. But I do expect Atkins, the quarterback, to be better this year. He's a sophomore, so he'll come out and probably be a little sharper than he was. So, because even if he just upticks that completion rate a little bit, like it'll make a huge difference for them. But again, will he have the time to do that? That'll be the question.
Yep, tough to make plays if you're on your back or running for your life.
Exactly.
One or the other.
So if he is able to have any time, of course the WSU's weakness is the secondary. At least we assume. The new guys could be great, but the weakness is likely the secondary. So it'll be interesting. They actually have he's listed as a backup, but I'm sure he'll get lots of play because they run a sort of air raid. They have a 6'3" outside receiver named Drew Dan. I'm sure they'll try to throw it up to him against our 5'10" corners a couple times. And that's a play you can run without much protection.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm expect to see that. They have a Baylor transfer who caught 41 passes as a sophomore at Baylor. So They might have some talent at receiver that could give WSU some trouble on the back end, but again, it all comes down to I forget I have to mention they also have a receiver named Robert Downs III, who better be called Iron Man.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'd be very disappointed.
I know.
Or at least Tony. They can call him Tony or something.
Tony, just for fun.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's the New Mexico State offense. They weren't good last year. They were 113th in SP plus or 116th in SP plus. Their running was a little bit better than their passing, but again, they're going to be passing more than that. Expect to see lots of Huntley, and then expect WSU to largely limit them quite a bit, basically. Yep. So yeah, Jeff, before we get into the defense, let's take a quick break.
Got it. And we're back.
All right. Are you ready for some WSU air raid versus New Mexico State?
Otherwise known as football porn.
Yeah, New Mexico State, in quotes, defense.
Quote, unquote, defense.
So the Aggies had a pretty, they went to a bowl game in 2017, had a not a good defense, but a decent enough defense. But last year they were hit by injuries quite a bit. But the problem is, it's not like they're getting those injured guys back. A lot of them graduated. So,
right.
So they, the real interesting probably thing about their defense is that they actually really good at getting into the quarterback. They were 19th in sack rate last year. The problem was a lot of teams just ran the ball against them because they were very poor at defending the run. But I don't think you'll see that much against from WSU. I think they'll be willing to sling it anyway. So you could see Anthony Gordon get pressured, get hurried. I do think if he gets pressured early, that could cause some, cause the offense to start a little slowly. It is his first game; he will be nervous.
Well, you'd have to think that's the game plan, right? Is for them. If you're them, you're like, okay, we want to try and disrupt a start. Guy starting his first game, he's probably got butterflies. Whatever we can do to make him maybe confused or second guessing himself or making throws maybe into windows that aren't there. I mean, just whatever they can do to sort of try and disrupt him. I mean, obviously you always want to try and disrupt the quarterback, but I would think that, the offense may see a little more creative. I don't know if that's the right word, but creative defenses trying to maybe get him to think he's seeing something that he's not seeing, or at the very least, maybe bring extra numbers, just something to try and get him off rhythm at the start of the game. Because if he gets in a rhythm, he's going to get comfortable, and then, of course, it can snowball pretty bad from there.
Yeah, and I think they do have some players that could be a nice little test for the offensive line. Their nose tackle, Roy Lopez, actually 63 tackles last year and 12.5 tackles for a loss and 4 sacks, which is pretty impressive numbers.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Nose tackle position, yeah. And then they got a guy on the outside at end, Cedric Wilcox, who 7 sacks last year. So they have, and he only played in 10 games. So they have some guys that can get to the quarterback, and they obviously scheme to do that. That's how you get 19th in sack rate. You also point out that their schedule is pretty weak overall last year. So, take some of these numbers with a little grain of salt. They're not playing. They played a couple tough games, but other than that, they're playing a lot of not very good FBS schools.
Well, the other thing you see is that let's see, game opener against Wyoming. Okay, so the team we beat, right?
Yeah.
They lost 20. So Wyoming put up 29 points and only needed to throw the ball 22 times, right? And we saw what that Wyoming offense was, which was bad.
Yeah.
And then the next week, Minnesota scores 48, throwing the ball 34 times. Utah State scores 60, throwing the ball 31 times. New Mexico scores 42, throwing the ball 19 times. So, I mean, that's kind of like the theme on down. Really, the only game that was sort of there were 2 games that were shootouts that were kind of high volume-ish passing by their opponents. The first game they played against Liberty at home, that they won 49-41. Liberty threw the ball 54 times. Alcorn State threw the ball 37 times. Other than that, everybody else was like 31 or less. Georgia Southern beat them 48-31, throwing the ball 4 times.
Well, that's Georgia Southern. They were
I
a
know.
triple option.
But still. Yeah. The next week, Texas State won 27-20, threw the ball 18 times. So, I just think teams weren't compelled to throw against them. It was kind of like those Paul Wolf teams. Oh, look, they're only giving up 200 yards a game passing. It's
right.
like, yeah, that's because they're giving up 400 yards a game on the ground.
Yeah, because no one needs to pass. And then when you're
good luck.
That,
like teams are just like, we're already up by 50 points. We don't need to throw the ball.
No.
Anyway.
WSU doesn't care about that.
That's correct. We are going to throw it no matter what.
So, yeah, on the back end, that could be an adventure. They do have one guy, Shamad Lomax. He's definitely their best corner. He was also, as Bill Connolly pointed out in his preview of them for SB Nation before he went to ESPN, probably was their best safety as well. But so he's sticking at corner. They actually have what Theo pointed out, a last chance. Well, I have in my preview, Last Chance U, and Theo pointed out that he was Calvin Jackson Jr.'s roommate at Independence Community College. Ray Buford Jr., he actually started 6 games last year, the first 3 and the last 3. Interesting thing about him is that he played for Tracy Claeys at Minnesota, and one of those players that got expelled from the school for that sexual misconduct case that ultimately got Claeys fired based on his handling of it, the boycott related to it. So that'll be interesting. They'll see each other. They'll have a bit of a reunion. But yeah, so he's the other corner. So if you watch Last Chance U, you've seen him before.
All right.
That'll
be a fun little. I hope he gets to cover Jackson. That'd be sweet.
That would be cool, actually. That'd be an interesting. I am not sure that they name their cornerbacks a weird thing, and I'm not sure which one is the left and which one is the right. After that they have a starting free safety who's never started. He started 5 times his sophomore year, but he's a senior now. That's the only time he's ever started. He's played a lot, but he's never started before. So you kind of wonder if he wasn't good enough to start on last year's defense, and how good could he possibly be? And then you have 2 freshmen in the 2 deep at the strong safety position. So I think there's some opportunity for our elite group of wide receivers to get free. Again, it'll come down to keeping Anthony Gordon clean, and which I think will largely do. But I think you'll see Gordon get pressured more than you would expect, just because of the way New Mexico State schemes.
Well, and that kind of brings me to where I'm thinking maybe we could wrap this up. Is this like the question of what do you want to see, right? So for example, if we kind of go, okay, well, Anthony Gordon's obviously going to be the big storyline, right? So if he's going to get pressured a little more than what we would expect, or just based on the fact that they're going to send a lot of numbers, what is it that you think that you want to see from the offense that would constitute success? Like, you leave this game. I mean, look, we're both assuming that they win, right? I mean, I think
right.
That's where we're coming from. So if that's what we're assuming, what is it that we see where we walk away and go, oh yeah, okay, that was good? Is it just points? Is it how we get to the points? Like, what's your thought on that?
Right. Yeah. So my expectations are probably a little more tempered than others. I basically have I have in the back of my mind how the offense has started slowly in the first few games, and we've kind of wrung our fingers wring our hands together and like, oh no, like it's going to be a rough year. But then they've usually picked it up around Pac-12 play. Mm-hmm. So I'm not like expecting like a drop 70 here, even though it's definitely capable. Like, if this was like a late September game, I would, I'd be all about it. But I think given that it's Gordon's first start, and given they typically start out slowly, there might be some kinks to work out. There might be some, missed time routes that lead to incomplete passes. You might see a sack in there somewhere that ends a drive. I think I think that we'll probably have a higher point total than those games against like Montana State and San Jose State, because you won't see New Mexico State try to take the air out of the ball as much. They won't be limiting us. So what I really want to see, I'm going to look at the number of drives that we have, and I'd like to see really at least 4 points a drive, honestly.
Yeah.
So that would probably put us around 50 points. 45 to 50 points.
Yeah.
Which I'd be happy with in a first game.
Sure.
I'd like to see Gordon take some risks, but not be stupid. Like don't throw obvious picks, but at the same time, don't go full Luke Falk and go in your turtle shell and wait for whatever. Just especially given this defense's strategy, looking for that first read, there's going to be a guy open probably a lot if you just get the ball out of your hands, and we have a lot of guys that can make plays once they have a little space. So I just want to see him. I'd love to see him sort of manage the game that way. Look for those quick reads and just kind of take what's there, but also not be afraid to kind of trust his arm and trust that your guy's going to get open and throw that out route, throw that cut. Because that's where you're going to get the big plays from, and so yeah, I'm again 4 points a drive. It's the first game. Honestly, I would be thinking 6 points a drive if this was a little bit down the road. But I think I'm thinking roughly 12 drives, 48 points.
Yeah,
that sounds pretty good to me.
For me, I think it's going to be a little more qualitative than quantitative. I mean, yeah, I want the points. If they are under 40, I'm feeling probably left a lot on the table. But what I think, sometimes you can see there's a difference between, the quality of the points, right? And when we start thinking about predictive value, right? Like, okay, what does this mean going forward? First game of the year, you're always kind of looking for those signals of what's coming after that. I mean, when we think back to, the Wyoming game last year, the second half was very strong. You could see that sort of the rapport was growing with Minshew and the receivers. You'd see they were kind of figuring some stuff out on the fly. I think that I would hope that maybe there's a little less figuring stuff out on the fly here for a guy who's been in the program for as long as Gordon has. I mean, even though he's a new starter, he's thrown to these guys literally thousands of times. And, and I think, when they I think there's a threshold where that comfort level comes in. And if we remember, when Luke Falk stepped in as a sophomore back in 2014, redshirt sophomore, redshirt freshman, he had already, obviously almost 2 years in the program. He had, thrown a ton of passes. I mean, there was already a rhythm there. So I guess that's kind of what I'm hoping for. I think explosive plays are going to be a given. So what I want to see is that, when we do get explosive plays, it's things that, appear to be the right read, rhythm throws, throwing guys into space, that kind of stuff versus, maybe taking a heartbeat too long to make the pass. The window was really big though, so he still gets a chunk play. You know what I mean? There's the explosive plays that come from the quarterback making the play happen with the throw. There's the explosive plays that come from just the other team being bad. And I kind of want to see more of the former than the latter. And I just kind of want to see, and this is hard to define, but what looks like command, right? I just kind of want to look at it and go, yeah, he's got command of this. He's, he knows what he's doing. He's confident. Obviously I think there's going to be nerves, but I'll be honest. I'm curious to see how many nerves there actually are. He's a pretty cool customer. That's, obviously I didn't spend a ton of time around him, basically 2 days, kind of watching him operate and interact with people, but he seems like a pretty chill, pretty laid back dude. And he's a guy who I think has a lot of confidence in himself. So I'm curious to see how far those nerves go. If I see, again, command throws where he's helping guys make plays, that's the kind of stuff that would make me feel good going forward. What about the defense? What do you think you want to see from the defense against New Mexico State?
So that's I definitely want to see that the secondary is going to be curious to me. I want to see.
Yeah,
I'd love if they avoided any big miscommunications, because I do see that happening, like a miscommunication, and they get someone loose in the back end, and that's how they score 1 or 2 touchdowns. Because that happened against in the third game against Eastern Washington even last year. So obviously it's funny to say because Eastern's FCS, but this is not the level of offense that Eastern is. But still, I'd like to see them have a clean game. I'd love to see them, jump some routes and get a turnover too, because I think there'll be an opportunity there with this quarterback. He basically averaged an interception every game. So, and in the games that if you take out the games where he just like went nuts, like he threw quite a few. But I'm just hoping to see that back end, and I want to see the defensive line and dominate this offensive line. They're not good. They're not good. They're big. They're all 300 plus pounds. But if you're a redshirt freshman, 300 plus pounds, and you're starting at New Mexico State, I'm going to assume you're not super athletic.
Yep.
Sorry, Austin Young and the other guys. But like, I want to see our guys use their athleticism to, jump gaps, to just blow up plays. I want to see that. I want to see tackles for loss. And then on the same end, I don't want to see those mental mistakes. I mean, I expect some mental mistakes. It's the first game, but just don't have anything so crazy. I mean, it'd be great. I mean, if they come out and they're like perfect, like execution, that's going to be a great season, but I don't expect that. But I still, and I'd love to see when the backups inevitably come in like the third and fourth quarter, that there's still some dominance there, and they're not getting run over. So there's a lot of things to ask for there, but this is what you have to look at in a game that's probably going to be separated by 5 touchdowns or more.
Right.
So that's just what the stuff you got to look at.
Yeah, I don't want to see the corners get beat.
Yep.
That's pretty much me.
That would be bad.
Like, I'm like, if they're getting beat, now obviously people can get better, things can change, et cetera, et cetera. But if they're just getting flat whipped, then I don't, we'll see. So I also am this is another thing I'm kind of watching for along those lines, maybe not like a result type thing, but I'm going to be curious. I'm going to try and pay as close attention as I can to who is playing and when they're playing and how they're being rotated and how they're being used. I think for the most part, when I'm watching the game, I'm really just going to kind of have eyes on the secondary for the most part. Yeah. And just kind of watch how that's unfolding. Cause I think that's going to say a lot about who plays and whatever going forward. I'd be surprised if Clays isn't still experimenting. So we'll
I would totally assume that he is, given the rush nature of putting together that back end that they've had to do.
And the number of parts that are just kind of, he obviously hasn't been satisfied.
Right.
And he's been moving people around. Now, either that means we have a bunch of dudes who can play, or we have a bunch of dudes who are lost. And usually it's the last thing.
Right.
And so I don't think it's, people have been kind of lamenting the Armani Marsh thing, where it's like, oh my God, this guy is one of our best corners, and not because of anything personal or anything like that, but just, former walk-on, he's short, right? We've sort of been assuming they want to get longer at corner, so it's sort of like, oh man, what is, it's always what does this mean? And they're getting torched by our receivers and, whatever. I do think that maybe it's a situation where, he's a guy who's maybe, he's been here for a few years now. Maybe he's a little more comfortable. A lot of those other guys are new. So I don't know, we'll see. I'm, again, curious, very curious to see. I think a lot of people assumed certain guys would be starting, and that's kind of not playing out. I think most people assume Strong looks like he's heading there. The other one, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
All right. I want 2 predictions from you.
What's that?
I want a score.
A score?
And I want a length of game prediction.
Oh God. Okay. I'm going to go, let's go 60-7.
Nice. There's
going to be a busted something somewhere. It might be a kickoff, because their kick returner is very good. So, I'm going to go 60-7. And what was the other thing? Oh, time. 4:08.
4:08 was super long.
4:08.
Oh man, could have had a coffee on.
Totally.
That's giving me flashbacks to when I lived on the East Coast.
I know.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go a little bit lower, a little bit tighter. I'll go 52 to 14. I say they get a couple on the board.
That's reasonable.
Just because of the number of possessions. They find their way to the end zone a couple times. Possibly, I'm going to say probably one of them in the fourth quarter.
Reasonable.
So yeah, 52-14, and I'm going to go 3 hours 50 minutes.
All right.
All
that
right.
was 350, right?
Yeah,
that's what you said. Okay,
3 hours
350.
50, 50. So we'll check back on that if we remember on our next podcast. So,
and if we're way off, then we'll just
forget about it.
We'll just forget what we said.
Yeah, I already forgot what my score was.
Even though the internet lives forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever.
Well, all right, dude. We'll pay the hosting fees. All right.
Yeah. Have a safe drive.
Yeah, thanks, and go Cougs, everyone.
Go Cougs.